Here is a full-length drama story, Billionaire insults waitress in German, formatted for a what happens when a waitress, invisible to the world, is pushed too far. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry, accustomed to getting everything he wanted. She was just the woman pouring his water. When he decided to insult her in his native German, he assumed she was too poor, too uneducated to understand. He didn't just mock her. He sealed his own fate. He had no idea that the woman he just insulted wasn't just a waitress. She was the one person in the world who could destroy his entire empire. Stay tuned, as this isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story of an empire's spectacular fall. The air inside La Saphir was different. It wasn't just filtered, it was rarefied, costing more per breath than the average person's daily wage. The clinking of cutlery on porcelain was a delicate, hushed symphony. The clientele, a collection of old money and shark-like new money, spoke in low, confident murmurs, their voices never rising, never showing unnecessary emotion. And then there was Irena. To the patrons of La Saphir, Irena was less than a ghost. She was a function. A pair of hands that refilled a glass of 1982 Chateau Margaux, a quiet voice that confirmed, "Right away, sir," a shadow that cleared away the remnants of a $500 truffle-infused main course. Her uniform, a starched black and white ensemble, was a cloak of invisibility. Tonight, she was exhausted. The double shift was murder on her feet, and the thought of her looming corporate law exam was a knot of acid in her stomach. But she kept her smile placid, her movements economical and graceful. She needed this job. The tips paid for the textbooks that Columbia Law School didn't cover, and the proximity to power was illuminating. She watched these people. She listened. At 8:03 p.m., the heavy oak doors opened, and a chill followed the new arrivals. The room didn't fall silent, but the energy shifted. It coalesced around one man. He was Maximilian von Hess. He wasn't just rich. He was dynastic. Von Hess Global was a hydra of logistics, pharmaceuticals, and private equity, its tentacles reaching into every corner of the globe. He was tall, with severe, handsome features, dark hair swept back, and eyes the color of a frozen lake. He wore a bespoke Savile Row suit that probably cost more than Irena's car. He didn't walk. He possessed the space he moved through. He was flanked by two other men, Brian Thorne and Marcus Vance, who looked like paler, more nervous satellites orbiting his immense gravity. "The Von Hess table, Mr. Von Hess," the maitre d' whispered, bowing slightly. Maximilian didn't acknowledge him. He was already scanning the room, his expression one of profound boredom, as if the entire opulent restaurant was a mild disappointment. Irena was assigned their section. Her stomach tightened. She'd served arrogant men before, but Von Hess was a different species. He was apex predator. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I offer you an aperitif?" Irena asked, her voice calm and professional. Maximilian didn't even look at her. He was busy sliding a platinum-cased Patek Philippe from his wrist and placing it on the table with a soft thud, as if marking his territory. He spoke to the man on his left. "This is what happens when you let the board question the Brazil acquisition. They get ideas." "Sir," Irena repeated gently, stepping just slightly into his peripheral vision. He finally turned his icy gaze on her. It was not a look of acknowledgement, but of interruption. He held up one finger, a silent command for her to wait, before continuing his conversation for another full minute. Irena stood, spine straight, her tray balanced perfectly. She was used to being treated like furniture. Finally, he turned back. "Water. Still. No ice." He snapped his menu closed. "And tell the chef the amuse-bouche was lukewarm last time. It won't be again." "Right away, sir." The dinner was a minefield of quiet demands and subtle dismissals. He sent back the wine, claiming it was breathing improperly, a distinction Irina knew was nonsense. He snapped his fingers, snapped them, when he wanted his water refilled. Irina maintained her composure, her face a perfect mask of polite servitude. She was a professional. She was also cataloguing every microaggression. The incident happened during the main course. Maximilian was gesticulating wildly, explaining a hostile takeover strategy to his companions. "You don't ask for the company, you break its legs and then offer it a crutch," he was saying. His hand, sweeping through the air, connected with his water glass. It wasn't a full spill. A small amount of water, perhaps 2 tablespoons, splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth near his plate. A tiny, insignificant mistake. Irina was there in an instant. "My apologies, sir. Let me get that." She moved with swift efficiency, holding a folded napkin to contain the small spill. Maximilian froze. He looked at the damp spot on the tablecloth. He looked at Irina's hand, now resting near his plate. A deep, unsettling silence fell over the table. His companions, Brian and Marcus, held their breath. Maximilian von Hess slowly turned his head to Brian Thorne. He leaned in, and the smile that touched his lips was pure venom. He lowered his voice, switching from English to sharp, aristocratic German. He murmured, his voice dripping with contempt. "Look at this. Just unbelievable. This clumsy little waitress. She's probably never truly worked a day in her life." Irina's hand, the one holding the napkin, paused for a fraction of a second. "She's probably too stupid to string 2 sentences together. I bet she can't even count to 20 without taking off her shoes." He let out a short, barking laugh. A useless, pretty little nothing. Her only job was to stay out of the way, and she failed at even that. Brian Thorne chuckled nervously. Marcus Vance just stared at his plate. Maximilian finally turned his cold eyes back to Irina, expecting to see the same placid, idiotic smile. He dismissed her with a wave. "Go on, clean it up." He prepared to return to his English conversation, and then the invisible girl spoke. Irina did not move. She remained poised, the damp napkin still in her hand. She lifted her head, and for the first time that night, she made direct, unblinking eye contact with Maximilian von Hess. Her face was no longer the serene mask of a waitress. It was something else. It was cold, analytical, and utterly devoid of fear. She spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it sliced through the restaurant's hushed ambiance like a shard of ice. And she spoke in German. Not just German, but Hochdeutsch, the purest, most educated, and most formal version of the language, tinged with a faint, old-money Berlin accent that Maximilian recognized instantly. She said, her tone level and precise. "Excuse me, sir." Maximilian von Hess froze. His wine glass, halfway to his lips, stopped. The color drained from his face. His associates, Brian and Marcus, looked up as if they'd been tasered. Irina continued, her gaze locked with his. "Your arrogance is so deafening, it almost drowns out your poor taste in companions." Brian Thorne's nervous smile vanished. "And as for my intelligence, it does not require a genius to recognize an inflated, insecure narcissist when one sees one, even one with her shoes on." The silence at the table was no longer polite. It was absolute, brittle, and terrifying. Maximilian von Hess looked as though she had physically struck him. He was a man who commanded boardrooms, who crushed competitors, who moved markets with a word. He was not a man who was spoken to this way. Ever. Least of all by a waitress. "Sie," he stammered, his face turning a dangerous, mottled red. What did you say? Ich habe eine Tatsache festgestellt, Irina replied, switching effortlessly back to English, her voice now carrying for the entire section to hear. I stated a fact. You are rude, you are arrogant, and you are, fundamentally, a bully. You spilled your water, and you chose to insult me for it in a language you assumed I was too stupid to understand. She leaned in, just a fraction, lowering her voice to a confidential whisper that was more threatening than any shout. But you assumed wrong. You see, Mr. Von Hess, some of us, pretty little nothings, actually listen. And some of us, remember. She straightened up, her professional mask sliding back into place, but her eyes remained like steel. May I bring you a new napkin, or have you made enough of a scene? The sheer, audacious insolence of it hung in the air. Maximilian was shaking, his knuckles white as he gripped his Patek Philippe on the table. He was a man of absolute control, and he had just lost it in front of his subordinates. He finally found his voice, a low, guttural roar. You, he spat, pointing a trembling finger at her. You are fired. Of course I am, Irina said with a small, sad smile. People like you never face consequences. You only create them for others. Get out, he roared. This time the entire restaurant turned. The maitre d', a man named Philip, rushed over, his face pale with panic. Mr. Von Hess, is there a problem, sir? This thing, Maximilian hissed, gesturing to Irina, is to be removed, now. I want her gone. I want her blacklisted. She will never work in this city again. Philip looked at Irina, his eyes pleading. Irina, what did you do? I spoke German, Philip, Irina said calmly. She unclipped her black apron, folded it precisely, and placed it on her tray. Apparently Mr. Von Hess isn't a fan. She turned, not to the maitre d', but back to Maximilian. She looked him up and down, one last time. Enjoy your meal, Mr. Von Hess. She walked away. She didn't scurry. She didn't look back. Her spine was straight, her head high. She walked past the stunned diners, through the service doors, collected her jacket and her well-worn copy of Cases and Materials on Corporate Law from her locker, and walked out the back door into the cool night air. Back at the table, Maximilian was breathing like a bull. Sir, Brian Thorne ventured, his voice a squeak. Find out who she is, Maximilian commanded, his voice dangerously low. I don't mean her server name. I mean everything. Where she lives, where she's from. I want to know the name of her goddamn goldfish, and I want her ruined. Am I clear? Yes, sir, Marcus and Brian said in unison. Maximilian stared at the empty space where Irina had stood. He had been publicly humiliated. It was an imbalance in the universe he could not, and would not, tolerate. He picked up his phone and dialed a single number. Blackwood, he barked into the phone. I have a job for you, a ghost. I want her found. Irina did not go home. She walked for 40 blocks, the cold air biting at her cheeks, a strange, terrifying calm settling over her. She hadn't planned for this. The confrontation, the firing. It was a reckless, emotional impulse, and she was rarely impulsive. She arrived at a 24-hour diner, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and cracked vinyl booths. She slid into a booth, ordered a black coffee she couldn't afford, and pulled out her laptop. She was fired. Blacklisted if Maximilian von Hess had his way. Her tuition payment was due in 3 weeks. Her scholarship required her to be employed. This was bad. This was catastrophically bad. But as she sat there, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, familiar anger. It was the same anger that had been her constant companion for 10 years. She opened a password-protected, triple-encrypted file on her computer. It was a file she hadn't opened in months, The file was titled Das Rabenprojekt, the Raven Project. It was a complex web of flow charts, financial statements, and photographs. It was a decade's worth of research, obsession, and pain. And at the very center of it all, like a spider in a web, was a photograph of a younger Maximilian von Hess standing next to his father, Friedrich von Hess. Irena clicked on another file, a digitized newspaper clipping from a Berlin newspaper dated 12 years ago. The headline read, Reinhard Stahl bricht zusammen, Selbstmord des CEO vermutet. Reinhard Stahl collapses, CEO suicide suspected. She stared at the grainy photo of the man mentioned in the article, a kind-faced man with laugh lines around his eyes. Her father, Klaus Reinhardt. Irena was not Irina the waitress. She was Irina Reinhardt. The Reinhardts and the von Hesses had been the two pillars of German industry for a generation. Reinhardt Steel and von Hess Logistics were rivals, but her father had always believed in honor, in a fair fight. Friedrich von Hess, Maximilian's father, had not. Friedrich had orchestrated a ruthless, clandestine corporate raid. He'd used shell companies, spread disinformation, and triggered a run on their stock. He'd bought up their debt in secret. In 6 short weeks, a century-old empire was brought to its knees. Reinhardt Steel was forcibly absorbed by von Hess Global for pennies on the dollar. Klaus Reinhardt, bankrupted, disgraced, and facing criminal charges Friedrich had anonymously manufactured, had driven his car off the Stralau Bridge. Irina, then 16, and her mother were left with nothing. They fled to America, to her mother's distant cousin in New York, and disappeared, changing their name. Her mother died 2 years later, Irina believed, from a broken heart. Irina was left alone, with nothing but a burning, meticulous and patient rage. She wasn't just a law student. She was a hunter. She had chosen Columbia Law specifically because its corporate law program was the best in the world. She'd chosen to work at La Sophia because she knew, from her research, that it was Maximilian's favorite restaurant. She wasn't just serving him wine. She was studying him. She was listening to every word, every boast about a deal, every casual mention of a partner or a problem. Her encounter tonight had been a mistake. She had let his personal, pathetic insult get under her skin. She had shown her hand. Stupid, 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 she whispered, rubbing her temples. He knew she spoke German. He knew she was smart. He would be looking for her. He would dig. And when he found out who she was, a cold dread settled on her. He wouldn't just blacklist her. He would try to crush her, the same way his father crushed hers. The game had just accelerated from a cold war to a hot one. "All right," she whispered to the flickering diner light. "All right, Maximilian. You want a war? You've had one coming for 12 years. She closed the file on her father and opened another. This one was labeled VHG, Acquisitions Syntech. It was a small, seemingly boring robotics firm von Hess Global had acquired 6 months ago. From scraps of conversations she'd overheard at the restaurant, Maximilian boasting to Marcus Vance about a brilliant piece of accounting, she suspected something was very, very wrong with the deal. She had been planning to wait, to graduate, pass the bar, and find a way into the SEC or a rival firm, to build a case brick by brick. Now she had no time. She had to use what she had. She pulled out a fresh burner phone. She had to strike first before he found her. She started typing a message to a very specific financial reporter at the Wall Street Journal. "I'm just a clumsy little thing, she muttered. "Let's see how you like it when I stumble." Maximilian von Hess did not sleep. He returned to his penthouse, a sterile expanse of glass and steel overlooking Central Park, and paced. The humiliation burned in his gut like acid. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she'd looked at him. With pity, with contempt, as if he were the insect. His private security head, a man known only as Blackwood, arrived at 3 a.m. Blackwood was the opposite of Maximilian, compact, quiet, and utterly unremarkable. He was a man who, like Irina, specialized in being invisible. "Sir," Blackwood said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Tell me," Maximilian demanded, not turning from the window. "Irina Stevens, 26, lives in a studio walk-up in Morningside Heights, no family listed, attends Columbia Law School." Maximilian turned, a dark smile playing on his lips. "Law school? So the little nothing has claws, and the German?" "That's where it gets interesting," Blackwood said. He placed a tablet on the marble table. "She's Irina Stevens on all her current documentation, but her financial aid, her original undergraduate application, it's all tied to a different name. Irina Reinhardt." The name hit Maximilian like a physical blow. He staggered back a step. "Reinhardt? Klaus Reinhardt's girl?" "Yes, sir. It appears so. Fled Berlin 12 years ago with her mother after the acquisition. Mother died. The girl has been in New York ever since. Clean record. Top of her class. Seems she's been working under her mother's maiden name, Stevens, to stay off the grid." The pieces slammed together in Maximilian's mind. The restaurant, her presence, the German, the look in her eyes. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a random encounter. It was an ambush. "She was waiting for me," he whispered. The sheer, calculated audacity of it was breathtaking. The humiliation of the restaurant curdled into something else, a cold, sharp spike of genuine fear. This wasn't a disgruntled waitress. This was the ghost of his father's greatest victory, come to collect a debt. "Sir," Blackwood said, "there's more. At 1:15 a.m. tonight, an anonymous tip was sent to Sarah Jensen at the Wall Street Journal." "Go on." "It concerns the Syntec acquisition. The tip contained specifics. It alleges that Von Hess Global deliberately misrepresented Syntec's liabilities to inflate your own quarterly earnings, and that you're planning to dissolve the subsidiary in the next 6 weeks, which would effectively wipe out its employee pension fund." Maximilian's blood ran cold. This was not a rumor. This was exactly what he was planning. It was a $500 million accounting trick, buried so deep in shell corporations and offshore accounts that his own board didn't know the specifics. "Who else knows this?" Maximilian demanded. "Only you, me, and Marcus Vance, sir," Blackwood said. Maximilian's mind raced. Marcus Vance, the nervous satellite at dinner, and Irina. She must have overheard something. Something she didn't understand, but which she knew was dirty. "Kill the story," Maximilian ordered. "We can't," Blackwood said flatly. "Jensen is a pit bull, and the information is too specific. It's not a rumor, it's a road map. She's already been calling our CFO for comment. The story will drop when the market opens." Maximilian slammed his fist on the marble table. "She did this? In 3 hours? After I fired her?" "It appears so." He was fighting a new kind of war. His father had fought with brute force and capital. This girl, she was fighting with information, with scalpels. "All right," Maximilian said, his voice dangerously soft. "She wants to fight. We will fight. But not on her terms, not with newspapers." He looked at Blackwood. "She's at Columbia Law, you said, on scholarship." "Yes, the Anheuser grant for first-generation immigrants. The Anheuser family owes me. I saved their shipping line from a hostile takeover last year. What's his name? called Dean Holloway at the law school. I am a major, anonymous benefactor. I am concerned about a student's ethical conduct. It has come to my attention that Irina Stevens, or Reinhardt, falsified her application, that she is unstable. A threat? Blackwood raised an eyebrow. It's thin, sir. They'll investigate. I don't need it to be true, Maximilian snapped. I just need it to be investigated. I want her scholarship suspended. I want her buried in an ethics review panel. She wants to be a lawyer? Fine. Let's see how she operates when the bar itself is locked against her. She wants to use scalpels? I'll use a sledgehammer. I'll destroy her foundation. And the journal story? Let it hit, Maximilian said, a cruel smile returning to his face. The stock will dip. I'll issue a denial. It will be a nuisance. But she will be destitute. She'll be fighting for her entire future, while I'm just fighting a bad news cycle. Let's see who breaks first. He turned back to the window, watching the sun begin to stain the sky over his city. She wants to be a ghost? Fine. I'll erase her. The first blow landed at 9:01 a.m. The Wall Street Journal article hit the wire. Von Hess Global faces allegations of pension fraud in Syntec deal. VHG stock plummeted 11% in pre-market trading. Maximilian's phone began to implode with calls from his board, from investors, from the SEC. He ignored them all, sipping his espresso, and issued a curt, 2-line press release calling the story unsubstantiated libel from a disgruntled source and promising full cooperation with any inquiries. He had expected this. He was prepared for the financial storm. The second blow, his own, landed at 10:30 a.m. Irina was in her small apartment, nursing her cheap coffee and watching the VHG stock ticker on her laptop with a grim sense of satisfaction. It wasn't a kill shot, but it was blood in the water. She had shown him, and the world, that he was vulnerable. Then her phone rang. The caller ID was Office of the Dean, Columbia Law. Her heart stopped. Ms. Stevens? The voice was cold, administrative. Dean Holloway. Yes, Dean Holloway. Good morning. I'm afraid it's not. An extremely serious allegation has been made against you. It concerns ethical and material misrepresentation on your application for admission and, consequently, for the Anheuser grant. Irina's blood turned to ice. Misrepresentation? What? I don't understand. The allegation states you are not Irina Stevens, but Irina Reinhardt, and that you deliberately concealed this identity, along with a history of family, legal entanglements, that call your character into question for bar admission. He found me, she thought, panic rising in her throat. He found me that fast. Dean, I can explain, Irina said, her voice shaking. My mother used her maiden name. You can explain it to the ethics committee. The dean cut her off. Effective immediately. Your scholarship and all university financial aid are suspended pending a full review. You are not to attend classes until the committee has met. You will be notified of the hearing date. The line clicked dead. Irina stared at the phone. Suspended. Scholarship gone. No classes. It was a kill shot. He hadn't just fired her from a waitress job. He had taken her entire life out at the knees. Her plan, her 10-year climb, her father's memory. All of it was evaporating. She was locked out. The fortress she had spent a decade building had been demolished with a single phone call. She sank to the floor, the full weight of his power crashing down on her. He didn't need to sue her for libel. He didn't need to threaten her. He just turned off her future. She had no money, no job, and now, no school. She was 16 again, powerless, watching her world burn. She spent the next 2 days in a daze, cycling between blinding rage and a deep, crushing despair. She tried calling legal aid, but what could she say? A billionaire anonymously accused me of being myself? She was trapped. On the third day, there was a knock at her door. She ignored it. It was probably the landlord, wondering why the rent check for next month was going to bounce. The knock came again, firmer. "Ms. Stevens?" or "Ms. Reinhardt, I need to speak with you. It's about Maximilian von Hess." Irina's head snapped up. She moved to the door, checking the peephole. She didn't recognize the man. He was tall, impeccably dressed, but his face was drawn with anxiety. He looked familiar. She opened the door, just a crack, the chain still on. The man looked relieved. "Thank God, I wasn't sure I had the right place." "Who are you?" The man winced. "My name is Brian Thorne. We were at the restaurant. I was one of the men at his table." Irina's eyes narrowed. The bad taste in companions. Get off my property. Or did he send you here to finish the job? To throw me out on the street? "No," Brian said, holding up his hands. "No, please. I'm not here for him. I'm here because of him. May I please come in? What I have to say, it can't be said in a hallway." Irina studied his face. He wasn't arrogant like Maximilian. He looked terrified. He looked trapped. She had 5 seconds to make a choice. She unhooked the chain. Brian Thorne slipped inside, and Irina locked the deadbolt behind him. Her tiny studio apartment was filled with stacks of law books. "He knows who you are, Irina," Brian said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "The Reinhardt name, he knows. The school, the scholarship, that was him." "I figured that part out, Mr. Thorne," Irina said bitterly. "What do you want?" "I want to help you," he said. Irina laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound. "Help me? You? You sat there and laughed when he insulted me." "I was nervous," Brian corrected, his face flushing. "I work for him. Or rather, I'm indentured to him. My father's company, Thorne Aeronautics, was one of von Hess Global's acquisitions. Not as dramatic as yours, but just as final. He bought our debt. I work for him to protect my family from financial ruin. I'm a prisoner, Miss Reinhardt, just a very well-paid one." He looked around the small apartment, at the sheer volume of research on the walls. "I knew there was something about you at that restaurant, the way you looked at him. It wasn't just a waitress, it was something else." He turned back to her, his eyes pleading. "He's a monster. But he's a reckless one. He's gotten sloppy. The Syntec deal. What you leaked? That was just the tip of the iceberg." Irina's gaze sharpened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Brian said, his hands trembling slightly as he reached into his briefcase, "that he's not just unethical, he's criminal, and I'm the one who files the paperwork. I'm his head of acquisitions. I know where all the bodies are buried." He pulled out a slim, silver USB drive. He held it between his thumb and forefinger. "He thinks he's fighting you, the ghost of Reinhardt Steele," Brian whispered. "He's arrogant. He's underestimated you, but he's completely forgotten about me, the man who knows the account numbers." Irina stared at the USB drive. This was the second twist, the enemy of her enemy. "Why?" Irina asked, her voice quiet. "Why risk everything for me?" "Because," Brian said, his gaze meeting hers, "you did what I've been wanting to do for 5 years. You spoke back. You called him what he is. My father. He's a good man, and von Hess is destroying him. This isn't just for you. It's for my family. It's for your family." He placed the USB drive on her kitchen counter. "He's planning to announce a massive stock buyback at the annual shareholders meeting in 2 weeks," Brian said. He's going to use the Syntech pension money, which he's moving offshore, to finance it, artificially inflating the stock price before the SEC can finish their investigation. He'll make $1 billion, pay a fine, and walk away. The pensioners will get nothing. Unless, Irina whispered, her mind already racing, the despair being replaced by a terrifying cold focus. Unless someone were to interrupt that meeting, Brian finished. Someone with irrefutable proof. This drive, it contains the Swiss transfer logs, the name of the Shell Corporation in Zurich, the Helvetia Holdings account. It's everything. Irina looked at the drive, then at Brian. He'll know it was you. He'll destroy you. He will, Brian agreed, a grim smile on his face. But if we do this right, by the time he knows, he'll be in federal custody. He won't be able to destroy anyone. Irina picked up the USB drive. It was heavy, not with data, but with a decade of A. All right, Mr. Thorne, Irina said. Let's go to work. Let's write the ending to this story. The next 2 weeks were a blur of frenetic, paranoid activity. Irina, now allied with Brian, operated from the shadows. They met in anonymous coffee shops, communicated through encrypted messages, and planned their attack with the precision of a military campaign. Irina was no longer just a law student. She was a general commanding a 2-person army. Brian, still working as Maximilian's right-hand man, was feeding her real-time intelligence. He's nervous, Brian texted her one night. The board is demanding answers about the journal article. He's moving the shareholders' meeting up by a week. It's in 4 days. This accelerated their timeline. Irina felt the pressure, but it made her sharper. She took Brian's raw data, the offshore account numbers, the secret ledgers, the coded transfer memos, and wove them into an airtight legal narrative. It wasn't just a tip this time. It was a full-blown federal indictment. She meticulously prepared packages, one for the SEC, one for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and one for Sarah Jensen at the Wall Street Journal. She set them all to be delivered at a precise time, 10:30 a.m. on the day of the meeting, 1 hour after it was scheduled to begin. That's not enough, Irina told Brian. The feds will move slowly. The board will protect him. He'll spin it. He'll escape. He always escapes. What else can we do? Brian asked. They were in a cab, the partition up, the only safe place they could talk. The data is the data. He needs to be exposed publicly, Irina said, her eyes fixed on the passing city lights. Not just in the paper, in front of his own people, in front of his board. He humiliated me in public. I'm going to return the favor. The meeting is at the VHG Tower, Brian said. Security will be insane. Blackwood is running it personally. There's no way you can get in. They have your face on a do not admit list. You're blacklisted from every building he owns. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Irina's face. He's looking for Irina Reinhardt. He's looking for Irina Stevens. He's not looking for a courier. The plan was audacious. It was reckless. It was perfect. Brian, as head of acquisitions, was in charge of preparing the shareholder welcome packages, glossy folders containing the annual report and a glowing letter from Maximilian. He arranged for a last-minute printing error that required a new box of reports to be delivered directly to the auditorium, bypassing the main security checkpoint. The delivery would be made by a bonded courier from a third-party service. The day of the meeting, Irina tied her hair back in a severe bun, put on a pair of thick, unflattering glasses, and wore the drab brown and yellow uniform of the quick-pace courier service. She carried a large, official-looking box. She arrived at the service entrance of the VHG Tower. "Delivery for Mr. Thorne," she mumbled, not making eye contact, holding out the fake work order. The guard barely glanced at her. He checked the list. Yeah. Thorne's emergency delivery. Go on up. Auditorium, 40th floor. Don't wander. She got in the service elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was inside. She walked through the back corridors and emerged into the plush, carpeted lobby outside the main auditorium. The room was packed. Hundreds of shareholders, journalists, and VHG executives mingled, drinking coffee. And there, on the stage, was Maximilian von Hess. He was in his element. He was laughing, shaking hands, a vision of power and charisma. He looked completely untroubled. The journal article and the stock dip already a distant memory. He was about to execute the final stage of his plan and make himself untouchable. Irina, keeping her head down, moved past the registration desk and slipped into the auditorium, finding a seat in the back row in the shadows. She placed the box at her feet. At 9:30 a.m., the lights dimmed. Maximilian took the stage to a round of applause. Thank you, he began, his voice booming with confidence. It's a pleasure to be here. We've had an incredible year at Von Hess Global, a year of bold moves and even bolder profits. He launched into his presentation. It was a masterpiece of corporate spin. He painted the Syntec dissolution as a painful but necessary restructuring to ensure long-term growth. He dismissed the journal article as rumors. Irina sat, her hands clenched, and waited. She listened as he lied, as he charmed, as he manipulated the truth, just as his father had done 12 years ago. Finally, after 45 minutes, he reached the Q&A. And now, I'd like to open the floor to any questions. Hands went up. The first few were softballs from friendly analysts. Mr. Von Hess, can you elaborate on the dividend forecast? Mr. Von Hess, what's your projection for the logistics sector? Irina's moment had come. She stood up. A handler with a microphone started walking toward a man in the front row. Irina stepped out into the aisle. Excuse me, she said, her voice clear and strong, but not yet her own. It was the voice of the courier, slightly nasal, nondescript. The handler paused. Maximilian squinted into the darkness of the back row. Yes? A question from the back? The handler, annoyed, walked the microphone to her. Irina took it. Her hand was perfectly steady. Thank you, she said. She took off the glasses. She pulled the elastic from her hair, letting it fall to her shoulders. On stage, Maximilian's smile faltered. He leaned forward, staring. He recognized her. His blood turned to ice. Blackwood, he hissed into his lapel mic. Security, the back row. But it was too late. Irina was already speaking. Mr. Von Hess, she said, her voice ringing through the auditorium, the voice of Irina Reinhardt. You may not remember me. My name is Irina Reinhardt. My father was Klaus Reinhardt of Reinhardt Steel. A gasp went through the room. The journalists, sensing blood, suddenly had their cameras pointed at her. I have a two-part question, Irina continued, her voice cold and precise. The first part is simple. On March 2nd, did you authorize a wire transfer of $450 million from the Syntec Employee Pension Fund to a shell corporation registered in Zurich? Maximilian was speechless. He was pale, gripping the podium. This is absurd. This meeting is for shareholders. Security, remove this woman. A shell corporation, Irina pressed on, her voice rising, named Helvetia Holdings, an entity whose sole proprietor is your brother-in-law, Thomas Brenner. The auditorium erupted. The board members in the front row turned, their faces aghast. This was not a rumor. This was a name. And my second question, Mr. Von Hess, Irina shouted as two security guards grabbed her arms. Was that $450 million the The money belonging to 5,000 Syntec employees intended to finance the stock buyback you were planning to announce today? It was checkmate. Maximilian looked like a cornered animal. Lies! These are baseless lies. Are they? Irina cried, even as she was being dragged. Then why don't you ask your head of acquisitions, Brian Thorne? He's the one who kept the receipts. In the front row, Brian Thorne stood up, holding a copy of the USB drive. He's right, gentlemen, Brian said to the board. The proof is all here. At that exact moment, 10:30 a.m., the doors at the back of the auditorium burst open. But it wasn't more of Blackwood security. It was two men in dark suits. SEC, we have a warrant. And behind them, two more. FBI. Maximilian von Hess, you are being detained for questioning regarding securities fraud and embezzlement. The room descended into total chaos. Cameras flashed. Shareholders shouted. Blackwood tried to get to Maximilian, but the federal agents were faster. They flanked him on stage, taking him by the arms. Maximilian's gaze swept the room, frantic, and found Irina. She was standing at the back, flanked by two other agents who were protecting her, not arresting her. She was a witness. Their eyes locked across the chaos. He saw no triumph in her face, no joy, just the cold, quiet finality of a debt being paid. He had called her a clumsy little thing. She had just brought his entire, multi-billion-dollar world crashing to the ground. The fall of Maximilian von Hess was not a quiet, dignified affair. It was a public execution. The moment the FBI agents put their hands on him, the illusion of his power shattered. The scene in the auditorium, captured on a dozen smartphones and by a stunned press corps, became the most watched financial news clip in a decade. It wasn't just an arrest, it was an immolation. The image of Maximilian, his face a mask of apoplectic rage and disbelief, being led past a calm, watchful Irina Reinhardt, was seared into the public consciousness. The VHG stock didn't just dip, it ceased to exist. Trading was halted. The board of directors, implicated by their own terrified silence, scrambled to distance themselves, resigning in a flurry of panicked press releases. The Wall Street Journal story, once dismissed as libel, was now the roadmap for a dozen other news outlets, each unearthing or a new layer of the von Hess rot. The legal case was a behemoth. It wasn't just the Syntec pension fund. It was a pattern, a business model, as the U.S. attorney called it, that stretched back decades, starting with Friedrich von Hess and his ruthless, criminal absorption of Reinhardt Steel. Irina's meticulously gathered research, combined with Brian Thorne's irrefutable internal ledgers, formed an ironclad case. Brian Thorne, as the key whistleblower, was granted full immunity in exchange for his testimony. He became a pariah in the world he once inhabited, but for the first time in his life, he was a free man. Irina's life, in contrast, was just beginning. The ethical complaint at Columbia vanished as if it had never existed. Dean Holloway, in a display of profound institutional memory loss, personally called to congratulate her on her tenacious pursuit of justice, offering her a full-ride fellowship for her final semester. Irina, now a campus legend, politely accepted the tuition and declined the public accolades. She had work to do. The trial of Maximilian von Hess began 6 months later. It was a circus. Maximilian, having spent a fortune of his non-frozen assets on a team of high-priced lawyers, looked gaunt and bitter. His defense was simple. He was a visionary, not an accountant. He had entrusted the details to subordinates, like Brian Thorne, who had clearly betrayed him. It was a poor strategy. Brian's testimony was devastating. For 2 days, he calmly walked the jury through the Swiss accounts, the dummy corporations, and the transfer logs, explaining in simple terms how Maximilian had systematically stolen $500 million. But the climax of the trial was Irina. When she was called to the stand, a hush fell over the court. She wore a simple dark blue suit, her hair pulled back. She was no longer a waitress, not yet a lawyer, but something in between. A witness. Maximilian's lead defense attorney, a shark named Harrison, tried to paint her as a vengeful, obsessed woman. "Miss Reinhardt," Harrison sneered, "is it true you spent a decade plotting against Mr. von Hess? That you took a menial job at a restaurant specifically to—" "What? Eavesdrop on him?" "Yes," Irina replied calmly, her voice filling the room. "I took a job at La Saphire to study the man who I believed had illegally destroyed my family and my father. I was correct. So this is about revenge. This is a personal vendetta." "This is about facts," Irina said, turning her gaze from the lawyer to the jury. "My personal history is what led me to the truth. But the truth is independent of me. The bank transfers are the truth. The empty pension fund is the truth." She then looked, for the first time, directly at Maximilian. He was staring at her, his eyes hollow with a hatred that had consumed him. "The truth," Irina said, "is that Mr. von Hess, like his father, believes some people are invisible. He believes the little people, the waitresses, the pensioners, the families he crushes, don't matter. He believes we're too stupid to understand him." She paused, and the courtroom was dead silent. "He insulted me in German, assuming I was a clumsy, stupid, pretty little nothing. He told his friends I couldn't count to 20. What he didn't realize is that I could count into the millions. I counted every dollar he stole from the Syntec employees. I counted every law he broke. And now, this court will count the years he must pay for it." The defense had no further questions. The verdict was swift, guilty, on all counts. At the sentencing, Maximilian, finally broken, tried to read a statement, but his voice cracked. The judge was unmoved. "Your crimes, Mr. von Hess, are not just financial," the judge declared, his voice ringing with contempt. "They are an assault on our very system. You operated from a position of immense privilege, and you used that privilege to prey on those who had none. You are the very definition of a predator. The arrogance you've displayed, both in your business and in this courtroom, is profound. You did not just make a mistake. You orchestrated a vast criminal enterprise. For this, the court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison." A gasp. 25. It was, effectively, a life sentence. As he was led away, his icy composure was gone, replaced by the pathetic, trembling rage of a king reduced to a prisoner. Irina stood on the courthouse steps, the winter sun cold on her face. She felt quiet. The fire that had burned in her for 12 years was, at last, extinguished. It wasn't joy, it was just done. Her father was avenged. The debt was paid. "So," a voice said beside her. It was Brian Thorne, a trench coat pulled tight against the wind. "So," Irina replied, a small smile touching her lips. "The federal marshals, as part of the asset forfeiture, have seized the Helvetia Holdings account," he said. "The Syntec pension fund is being made whole. All 5,000 employees will get every penny." "And Reinhardt Steele?" she asked. Brian's smile was genuine. "The civil suits are just beginning. The new VHG board is liquidating everything. As part of the settlement, they've reopened the original Reinhardt case. They are returning your father's original assets to the estate. It's not the empire it was. But it's not nothing." He looked at her. "What will you do, Irina? You're the most famous law student in America." "I'm going to graduate," she said. And she did. She graduated summa cum laude, top of her class. The offers that flooded in were staggering. Every white shoe firm in New York, the ones that had once represented men like von Hess, wanted the Von Hess Slayer on their letterhead. She turned every single one of them down. Instead, she used the assets from her father's restored estate to open a small, quiet firm in a modest building. The shingle on the door read, Reinhardt and Associates. Its mission was simple: corporate ethics litigation, representing pension funds, employee groups, and whistleblowers. Her first client was a group of factory workers from Ohio whose company had been acquired. A year later, Irina walked down a familiar, tree-lined street. She stopped outside La Sophia. It had been shuttered for months, a tomb of fine dining, its reputation irrevocably tied to the Von Hess scandal. A for sale sign was faded in the window. She made a call. 2 months later, the restaurant reopened. The name was the same. The elegant decor was the same. But the entire business model was different. The staff, many of whom Irina had hired back, including her old boss, Philip, as the new general manager, were paid a living wage, with full benefits and profit sharing. On their first fully booked Friday night, Irina sat not at a table, but in the small manager's office, reviewing the payroll. Philip knocked. "Ms. Reinhardt," he said, his voice still filled with a quiet awe. "We're full, and a package arrived for you, from Mr. Thorne." Irina opened the long, simple box. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a single, pristine, perfectly folded black and white waitress uniform. A small, handwritten card was tucked into the apron's pocket. It read, "A reminder of what they see, and what they never see coming. Congratulations." Irina held the starched fabric. It was no longer a cloak of invisibility. It was armor. It was a symbol. She looked up at Philip, at the sound of happy, relaxed diners outside her door, a restaurant built not on arrogance, but on respect. She was no longer a ghost. She was the one who haunted the powerful. She put the uniform in a display case on her office wall, a quiet, permanent reminder that the most dangerous person in the room is the one you refuse to see. And so, Irina Reinhardt proved that it doesn't matter who you are or how invisible the world makes you feel. A waitress, a student, a ghost. The smallest person can topple the greatest giant when they're armed with courage and the truth. The arrogance of Maximilian von Hess was his downfall, and Irina's dignity was her weapon. What did you think of Irina's ultimate revenge? Was it justice, or was it just as cold-blooded as Maximilian's own business deals? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story of drama, twists, and ultimate vindication, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good revenge story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories just like this one. We have new stories coming every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next.